They say you never truly understand your father until he's gone. For Daniel Brooks, that truth arrived on a gray spring morning in the quiet town of Maplewood, one of those places where everyone still waved from their porches and the diners smelled of bacon by 6 a.m. The phone call came before sunrise. A heart attack, the nurse said. Peaceful. Words that were meant to comfort, yet felt like stones in Daniel's chest. He hadn't spoken to his father in almost 2 years. Not since the argument, the one that had sent him storming out of that same house, swearing he'd never set foot in it again. Now all he could do was stare at the silence left behind. The drive back to Maplewood felt endless. Every familiar mile carried memories he didn't want. His father's old truck used to rattle down this same road, country songs leaking from a static-filled radio, his father humming off-key. Daniel had hated that sound back then. Now he would have traded anything to hear it once more. When he reached the small white farmhouse, the place looked smaller than he remembered. The paint had peeled, the wind chime on the porch hung crooked, and under the carport sat that car. His father's pride, a faded blue 1972 Buick Skylark. Rust bit at its edges, the chrome dull with years of sun. His father had loved that car like it was family. Every Saturday, rain or shine, he'd polish it until it gleamed. "You take care of what takes care of you," he used to say. Daniel had rolled his eyes. To him, it was just an old car from another century, slow, noisy, and embarrassing. At the funeral, people spoke of kindness, loyalty, small favors his father had done quietly for neighbors. Daniel listened, uneasy. They talked about the man he used to know before pride got between them. He wondered how many chances he'd wasted thinking there would always be time. After the service, the lawyer approached him with a manila envelope. Inside lay a single handwritten note and a key. "For my boy. Everything that matters is in the car." That was it. No mention of savings, property, or insurance, just that old Buick. Daniel forced a smile he didn't feel. "Figures," he muttered. "All that hard work, and this is what I get, a pile of rust." He tossed the envelope on the passenger seat of his own car and drove off, dust swirling behind him, never once looking back at the Buick staring after him like a ghost of unfinished love. Weeks passed. Life returned to its usual noise, city traffic, office deadlines, late-night takeout boxes. Yet something quiet followed Daniel everywhere. At stoplights he'd glance at other people's old cars, feel a twitch in his chest, then shake it off. He'd built his identity on leaving Maplewood behind. He had a condo, a decent job in marketing, a girlfriend who cared more about social events than slow Sundays. To everyone around him, Daniel was doing fine. But inside, he was hollow, a man full of everything except peace. Sometimes, in the still hours before dawn, he would picture his father in that garage, grease on his hands, country music low on the radio. He'd remember how his father would stop mid-tune, smile, and say, "You'll understand one day, son." Daniel always assumed he meant you'll understand hard work or you'll appreciate old cars. He never thought it might be something deeper. A month later, a letter arrived from Maplewood's local bank. It wasn't about money, it was a reminder to settle the property his father had left behind. Unclaimed vehicle, the note read, "Please remove from premises." That night Daniel drove back to the farm out of duty, not affection. The house stood quiet under a violet sky. The Buick sat exactly where he'd left it, dew glistening on its hood. The smell of oil and hay hung thick in the air. He ran a finger along the door frame. Dust coated his skin. He thought of selling it for scrap but hesitated. Something about the stillness felt sacred. On the dashboard lay his father's worn driving gloves. Beneath them, a folded church bulletin with the words "Faith in what you can't see." Daniel exhaled sharply, pocketed the keys, and stepped back into the night. "Maybe next weekend," he said aloud. But weekends kept coming, and the Buick kept waiting. Daniel starts resenting the old car and his father's memory. He faces judgment from others for selling or neglecting it. Strange coincidences and emotional triggers begin around the car. Seeds of the hidden twist are planted, but not revealed yet. Let's dive into the next chapter of He Rejected His Father's Old Car, until he learned what was hidden inside. They say grief has stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. But for Daniel, grief came as a single emotion that refused to move: resentment. Every morning, that old Buick sat at the edge of his driveway like a ghost, dusty, rusting, and unwanted. Its once shining chrome now looked like tarnished regret. Neighbors had begun whispering, "Shame he doesn't take care of his father's car," one woman said as she watered her flowers. Daniel overheard. He clenched his jaw and walked inside. He didn't want their pity, or their judgment. To them, the car was nostalgia. To him, it was a monument, to arguments never resolved, to words that still echoed. His father, Thomas Miller, had loved that car more than anything. On weekends, Daniel remembered watching him polish the hood until it gleamed like liquid silver. Back then, Daniel would beg to drive it, and his father would just laugh. "Someday," Thomas would say, "when you understand what it really means to take care of something." But Daniel never understood, not until it was too late. Now, at 37, he was tired of that Buick staring back at him every morning, like his father's final smirk. So one afternoon, Daniel decided to sell it. He listed it online. 1968 Buick Electra. Runs but needs work. Best offer. Within hours, messages poured in: collectors, mechanics, vintage enthusiasts. But one stood out. "I'll take it as is. Can pick up tomorrow." The man's name was Mr. Reynolds. The next morning, Daniel heard a truck rumble up the driveway. A tall, gray-haired man stepped out, wearing a cap that read "Classic Car Revival." He smiled warmly. "You must be Daniel. I've been looking for one of these for years." Daniel nodded stiffly. "You're in luck. It's all yours." Mr. Reynolds circled the car slowly, running his hand over the fender. His expression softened. "You know," he said, "cars like this hold stories. Some folks say they even hold secrets." Daniel forced a polite laugh. "Well, if it does, it can keep them. I just want it gone." Mr. Reynolds gave him a long look. "You sure about that?" "Positive." They shook hands, and the man began loading the car onto his trailer. But when the truck pulled away, something strange happened. Daniel felt a sudden, crushing weight in his chest, as if the car was taking something with it. He brushed it off as sentiment. Yet, that night he couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m., he got up and stood at the window. The driveway was empty. The space where the car once sat looked wrong, too bare, too silent. He turned away. The next morning his phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from Mr. Reynolds. "Daniel, it's me. I'm sorry, but something odd happened. While checking under the dashboard, I found, well, something you should see for yourself. Can you call me back?" Daniel's stomach dropped. He called immediately, but there was no answer. The line went dead. Hours passed. Then curiosity won. He grabbed his keys and drove to the address Mr. Reynolds had texted earlier, an old garage on the outskirts of town. When he arrived, the garage door was open, but the place was empty. No car. No Mr. Reynolds. Just a note pinned to the workbench. "Some things belong to family. Check your father's glove compartment." Daniel's pulse quickened. He drove home, half believing this was a prank. But when he got there, something made him stop cold. In the corner of the driveway, where the Buick had sat, lay a single key, one that didn't belong to any car he owned. It was old, brass, with a faded leather tag that read, "Glove Box." But the Buick was gone. That night, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that his father was laughing somewhere, not out of cruelty, but out of the same mischievous patience he'd always had. The next morning, he began searching for clues, old papers, garage boxes, anything that mentioned the car. In one box marked "Thomas's Things," Daniel found a faded maintenance booklet. Inside was a single note written in his father's handwriting. "If you're reading this, then you've finally learned what matters most. Don't sell your inheritance, understand it." Daniel froze. Inheritance? The will had left him the house, a few savings, and the car. Nothing else. Unless the car itself was more than it seemed. That's when Daniel decided he had to find it again. He spent the next 2 days calling every collector, mechanic, and auction house he could reach. No one had heard of a Mr. Reynolds or seen the car. It was as if both had vanished. But just as he was about to give up, an email arrived. The subject line read, "For Daniel Miller, from your father." His breath caught. It was from a private attorney named Margaret Ellison, who claimed to have handled his father's estate. Her message said, "Mr. Miller, your father left a secondary document sealed under confidentiality. It was to be opened only if the Buick Electra was ever sold. Please visit my office at your earliest convenience." Daniel's heart pounded. He drove straight there. Daniel parked outside Margaret Ellison's office, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across Maplewood's quiet streets. The office itself looked modest, an old brick building with a faded brass plaque reading, "Ellison and Associates, Estate Law." He hesitated at the door. His fingers traced the worn doorknob, heart-hammering. This is it, he thought. The truth my father left behind. Inside, Margaret greeted him warmly, her hair streaked with silver, her voice calm yet firm. "Daniel Miller," she said, holding a manila envelope. "Your father was very deliberate. He wanted you to find this, in your own time, on your own terms." Daniel swallowed. He nodded. "Ready." She handed him the envelope. Its edges were worn, as if it had been handled many times. On the front, in familiar handwriting, "For my son. You may finally understand." He slid a finger under the flap and opened it. Inside lay a folded piece of parchment, a set of small keys, and a note. "Daniel, if you're reading this, it means you've finally paused to consider what matters. Open the Buick. The car holds more than steel, it holds our family's legacy. Treat it well, and you will see what I've always tried to teach you." Daniel's hands trembled. He had to see for himself. But the Buick was gone, sold weeks ago. Or so he thought. Margaret looked at him gently. "Your father anticipated you might sell it. That's why I've arranged access to the storage unit where it's been kept. He wanted you to make the choice, whether to respect the past or dismiss it entirely." The storage unit smelled of oil and dust. Dim fluorescent lights flickered overhead. And there, under a faded tarp, sat the Buick Electra. Rusty in places, yet perfectly preserved in others, as if his father had paused time just for this moment. Daniel approached it cautiously, keys in hand. He slid the driver's side door open, the familiar scent of aged leather and polish washing over him. Inside the glove box, he found a small wooden box. Inside the box lay a set of old photographs, Daniel as a child, riding in the Buick with his father, laughing, carefree. A bundle of letters, written by his father over decades, reflecting on life lessons, regrets, and hopes for Daniel. A key to a small safety deposit box in Maplewood's bank, labeled, "For Daniel when he's ready." His eyes blurred with tears. One letter read, "Son, the car isn't valuable because of metal or paint. It's valuable because it carries memories, moments we shared, lessons I hoped you'd understand. If you've reached this, it means you've stopped rushing through life. You're ready to see that the things that matter most aren't bought or sold. They're felt, remembered, and honored." Daniel sank into the driver's seat. For the first time in years, he truly listened, not to the engine, not to the town, but to the quiet voice of his father's heart. The letters and photographs guided him through a reflection he hadn't allowed himself before. His father had never wanted him to inherit wealth. The car was a test of respect, patience, and emotional awareness. Life's real inheritance wasn't money or possessions. It was love, memory, and the lessons passed from one generation to the next. In the small safety deposit box, he found a simple journal and a check. Not enough to change his life materially, but enough to feel the tangible support of a father who had understood the son he might become. He realized now that his rejection of the car was also a rejection of the connection, guidance, and love it represented. And in that realization lay the true gift, understanding, gratitude, and the courage to live with intention. Over the next week, Daniel restored the Buick himself. Every scrub of polish, every turn of the wrench, became a meditation. Each small repair connected him to his father's care and dedication. Neighbors began to notice him at the garage, working quietly. Some smiled, some whispered, but Daniel no longer cared about judgment. He was learning patience, humility, and the satisfaction of honoring what truly matters. Driving the Buick through Maplewood, he saw everything differently. The old diner where his father had bought him ice cream. The park bench where they had talked about life and dreams. The school where his father had volunteered to teach auto repair. For the first time, Daniel realized that the car was never about the metal or the rust. It was about history, love, and the moments we often overlook in pursuit of what we think matters. The final letter explained the ultimate twist. Daniel, if you ever thought inheritance was wealth, you were mistaken. True inheritance is the life we live, the lessons we honor, and the love we pass on. This Buick is your reminder. Slow down, remember, and treasure what cannot be replaced. At that moment, Daniel understood. He hadn't lost anything. He had gained clarity, gratitude, and a deeper connection with a father he thought he had misunderstood. And just as importantly, he had learned that the smallest, seemingly insignificant gifts often carry the greatest truths. The first rays of morning spilled across Maplewood, illuminating the Buick Electra in Daniel's driveway. The car had once been a symbol of rejection and pride, but now it stood as a testament to understanding, patience, and love. Daniel wiped his hands on a rag, the faint scent of polish lingering in the air. He had spent weeks meticulously restoring the car, each stroke a meditation on the moments he had wasted, the arguments, the silences, the years he had taken for granted. Every bolt he tightened was a silent apology, every gleaming surface a tribute. Neighbors began to notice. Mrs. Clark, who had once whispered about Daniel's neglect, stopped by with a tray of freshly baked bread. "You've done a fine job," she said, eyes soft. "Your father would be proud." Daniel nodded, a lump in his throat. "I hope so," he whispered. Daniel climbed into the driver's seat, his hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. As he drove through the quiet streets of Maplewood, memories unfolded like pages in a book. The diner where his father had slipped him a nickel for ice cream. The park bench where they had once discussed life and dreams. The old school where Thomas had volunteered to teach auto repair. Each landmark reminded Daniel that inheritance was never about material wealth, but about the moments shared, the lessons taught, and the love quietly given. He realized that the resentment he had felt toward the car, and toward his father, had been a misunderstanding of intention. The Buick had been a vessel of patience and guidance, waiting for him to recognize the value hidden in the ordinary. Sitting in the car as the sun climbed higher, Daniel thought about life. He understood now that wealth is fleeting, but lessons and love endure. He understood that the moments we overlook often carry the deepest meaning. He understood that true inheritance is not measured in dollars, but in gratitude, memory, and the wisdom passed between generations. He pulled the car into the driveway and placed the small wooden box containing the letters back on the passenger seat. For a moment, he closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Dad." For the first time in years, Daniel felt peace. Word spread quietly through the town. People would see Daniel polishing the car, stopping to talk to neighbors, sharing stories about his father. The Buick became more than a car. It became a bridge between past and present, a symbol of love and memory. Daniel even started writing his own letters, passing along lessons to his children, ensuring that his father's legacy and the lessons of gratitude, patience, and understanding would continue for generations. One evening, Daniel parked the Buick under the old oak tree in his yard and looked up at the stars. The world was calm, and he finally felt that everything his father had tried to teach him had been understood. He smiled, realizing that the greatest treasures in life are not things we own but the wisdom, love, and memories we carry in our hearts. And so, Daniel learned what his father had known all along. The most valuable inheritance isn't money, property, or possessions. It's the love we leave behind, the lessons we pass on, and the memories we cherish. Sometimes, it takes a rusty old car to remind us that life's richest treasures are hidden in plain sight. As the Buick gleamed softly in the sunset, Daniel drove through the town once more. Each turn of the wheel was a connection to the past, a nod to the present, and a promise for the future. Life, he realized, was never about rushing forward. It was about noticing, appreciating, and honoring what truly matters, the people we love, the lessons we inherit, and the moments that shape our souls. And in that quiet, reflective drive, Daniel finally understood. Stories like this remind us that life's greatest treasures aren't material. If you believe that too, leave a red heart in the comments and share this story with someone you care about. Thank you for watching Hidden Tales Stories, where every twist leads to truth and every ending leaves a lesson. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories that touch the soul.